Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Eugene Ionesco's play Rhinoceros. Now, Ionesco is one of the best of the theater of the absurd playwrights of the mid-20th century. I think of Ionesco kind of almost in contrast to Samuel Beckett. If Beckett is the sort of Sartrean existentialism, existence is meaningless and that's a bad thing kind of vein, Ionesco is more in the Camusian absurdist vein, where existence is meaningless, isn't that fantastic? We're free to create our own meaning kind of vein. So Ionesco tends to be toward the funnier, happier, more playful side of absurdism, and I think Rhinoceros is a great example of that. So the play follows this young man named Béranger. We first meet him at a cafe with his friend Jean. Jean is very fastidious, nicely dressed, got a tie on, hair washed, brushed, combed, etc., shoes shined, etc. Béranger is the opposite. He is an alcoholic. He's shown up this morning for their chat, not having put on new clothes. He's all wrinkled. He's lost his tie, etc. So the early portion of the play basically focuses on Jean saying, Béranger, you need to sort yourself out. You need to get yourself fixed up in all of these different ways. And Béranger commits to doing it. He commits to changing. That's important because of what comes later in the play. While Jean and Béranger are sitting having their drinks in this cafe, a rhinoceros runs by, which I've never been to France, but as far as I know, typically that is not something that happens in French towns. You don't tend to have rhinoceri just roaming free. And so, this rhinoceros draws comment from everybody except Béranger, who's still pretty hungover and not really engaging with anything. Jean in particular is incensed that a rhinoceros has been allowed to run around free. There's some debate, discussion. Slightly later, another rhinoceros, or the same rhinoceros, runs by in the opposite direction. There's a big debate about whether or not it was the same rhinoceros, whether or not it had one horn or two, and whether Asian rhinoceroses have one horn or African rhinoceroses have one horn, and which one has two. As we go in further to the play, rhinoceri become more and more common. In the second act, Béranger goes to his office. He works as a law clerk. He goes into the office, and one of the members of the staff, Mr. Buff, has not shown up. Slightly later, Mrs. Buff arrives, chased by a rhinoceros. The rhinoceros crushes the stairs to the second floor office that they're in an attempt to get up to the office. As they are looking down at this rhinoceros, Mrs. Buff recognizes the eyes of her husband, determines that this is Mr. Buff, who is transformed into a rhinoceros. She leaps down, rides him away, etc. More and more people start turning into rhinoceri. Jean turns into a rhinoceros when Béranger goes to visit him. The other members of the office, one by one, turn into rhinoceri, until finally it's just Béranger and Daisy, the woman that he is in love with. It seems like she kind of settles for him on the basis that they are the last two people who are not rhinoceri. But then finally, she also succumbs to turning into a rhinoceros. So, what's the play about? Well, basically, this is an existentialist kind of tale. It's theater of the absurd, so there's always going to be some sort of existentialist or absurdist component. But essentially, the central theme of this play is about maintaining one's humanity, maintaining one's distinct individuality in the face of pressure to conform to the group, or pressure to conform to society. A herd instinct, one might say. This is essentially what the play is concerned with. Remember, in the early portion of the play, Béranger sets his mind to changing, to giving up drinking, to becoming cultured, including by going to plays by Eugene Ionesco. He's going to make sure his clothes are nice and that his shoes are shined, his hair is combed, that he's shaved, all this stuff. He's going to make all these changes, right? By the end of the play, he becomes increasingly neurotic. He becomes increasingly opposed to the idea of changing into a rhinoceros. He several times, as the rhinoceri basically start filling this town, he several times shouts at them that they won't get him, or that he will never join them. At one point, he says, he's talking to rhinoceri from outside of his building. He says, "You won't get me. I'm not joining you. I don't understand you. I'm staying as I am. I'm a human being. A human being." And so this is really the crux of it, is that in existentialist philosophy, in absurdist philosophy, there is the question of what constitutes a human being, or what constitutes human freedom. And that's a very difficult question that different existential philosophers give different answers to. But basically, across the board, there's some degree to which being a true human, or a true subject, or true existential hero, or whatever term it is, requires living with one's truth. So that is because the universe in existential and absurdist philosophy does not give us any meaning, because there's nothing inherently meaningful about our existence. We can construct meanings. And this is the thing for Camus, is to be an ethical being, you embrace the meaninglessness of existence and yet continue to be true to yourself. And so that's what we're getting here. Béranger, in his absolute categorical refusal to become a rhinoceros, Béranger is remaining true to himself against the social pressure to conform. Now, it gets very interesting at the end of the play. In the very last pages, Béranger is now the only person, as far as he knows, in the entire world, everyone else having changed into a rhinoceros. And Béranger becomes very interested in whether or not he's attractive. Partly this is about Daisy has just left him, but also we've seen with other characters who, before they have transitioned into rhinoceri, that they started to admire the rhinoceri. So actually, I think this is interesting with Jean's transition. So I want to take you back a little bit and talk about Jean's transition, because it sort of emphasizes this. the tendency that people have in the play before they become a rhinoceros is to start to identify with and rationalize becoming a rhinoceros. So, Jean says, I tell you it's not as bad as all that. After all, rhinoceroses are living creatures, the same as us. They've got as much right to life as we have. Beranger says, as long as they don't destroy ours in the process. You must admit the difference in mentality. Then Jean, pacing up and down the room and in and out of the bathroom, says, are you under the impression that our way of life is superior? That's an interesting existential question. But Beranger says, well, at any rate, we have our own moral standards, which I consider incompatible with the standards of these animals. Jean says, moral standards? I'm sick of moral standards. We need to go beyond moral standards. Beranger says, what would you put in their place? Jean, still pacing, says, nature. Beranger asks, nature? Jean says, nature has its own laws. Morality is against nature. Beranger says, are you suggesting that we replace our moral laws by the law of the jungle? Jean says, it would suit me fine. And so we get this kind of thing. We get this kind of embrace of the rhinoceros worldview or mentality prior to people transitioning into rhinoceri. So, and we've also had that in terms of sort of physical admiration for the rhinoceros. Its strength, its tough skin, it's whatever it is, in contrast to human beings. So, Beranger, the last character in the play, presumably the last human on Earth, says, I'm not good looking. I'm not good looking. They're the good looking ones. I was wrong. Oh, I wish I was like them. I haven't gotten any horns, more's the pity. The smooth brow looks so ugly. I need 1 or 2 horns to give my sagging face a lift. Perhaps one will grow and I needn't be ashamed anymore. Then I could go and join them. But it will never grow. He looks at the palms of his hands. My hands are so limp. Oh, why won't they get rough? He takes his coat off, undoes his shirt to look at his chest in the mirror. My skin is so slack. I can't stand this white, hairy body. Oh, I'd love to have a hard skin in that wonderful dull green color. A skin that looks decent naked without any hair on it, like theirs. He listens to the trumpetings. Their song is charming. A bit raucous, perhaps, but it does have charm. I wish I could do it. He tries to imitate them. Ah, brr. No, that's not it. Try again. Louder. Ah, brr. No, that's not it. It's too feeble. It's got no drive behind it. I'm not trumpeting at all. I'm just howling. Ah, brr. There's a big difference between howling and trumpeting. I've only myself to blame. I should have gone with them while there was still time. Now it's too late. Now I'm a monster. Just a monster. Now I'll never become a rhinoceros. Never, never. I've gone past changing. I want to. I really do, but I can't. I just can't. I can't stand the sight of me. I'm too ashamed. He turns his back on the mirror. I'm so ugly. People who try to hang on to their individuality always come to a bad end. Interesting existential statement. He suddenly snaps out of it. Oh well, too bad. I'll take on the whole lot of them. I'll put up a fight against the lot of them, the whole lot of them. I'm the last man left, and I'm staying that way until the end. I'm not capitulating. So we have this really interesting turn where Beranger seems like he's about to change into a rhinoceros. He goes through the same steps that other characters had gone through prior to their transformations. But then he still rejects it. He still maintains his humanity in the face of, again, that sort of herd instinct of becoming a rhinoceros like everyone else.